Okay, we're going to look at just a few problems with practicing solving equation. One of the things that, of course, that we need to know my inverse operation. So if we don't remember anything else, we need to know that the opposite of plus is subtract, subtract is add, multiply, divide, divide is multiply. That's going to be key in order to solve an equation. Let's look at a couple of practice problems, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to just scoot this over just a little bit. Now let's go ahead and let's look at some practice problems. So in this case, let's try something easy. So in this case, we know that x plus 4 is equal to, let's say, 16. Okay? So first of all, I'm going to draw my line. This is going to be super important because whatever I do to one side, I also have to do to the other side. So next, we need to identify my inverse. So we already see what my inverse is. So if I'm adding, the inverse would be to subtract. Subtract 4, subtract 4. Kind of like the inverse property that we was talking about earlier this week. Whenever I have 4 and I spin 4, I have nothing left. So 0 pair out. So x is equal to, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So 16 take away 4, I get 12. So therefore x is equal to 12. We know this is true because I can go back in and plug in x. So 12 plus 4, does that give me 16? Yes, that's how we know it's correct. Let's go ahead and let's try another one. (3n) is equal to 18. Again, remember when we have two things together with no symbol, that automatically lets us know that I'm going to be multiplying. And the inverse of multiply is divide. Draw my little line down the middle. Whatever I do to one side, I also have to do to the other side. So I'm going to divide by 3, divide by 3. Cancels out. So in this case, n is equal to, now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. 18 divided by 3, I get 6. And again, we know this is true because I can go back in and plug in my answer. So 3 times n, which is 6, does that give me 18? Yes. Let's step it up and let's try some with some decimals and some fractions. Let's say if I have x take away 2.5 is equal to 8. And again, it's the same exact process. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. Identifying my inverse. So my inverse of subtract is add. So I would just simply add. Plus 2.5 plus 2.5. Remember when we are adding decimals and I have a whole number, my decimal is going to be at the end. Plus 2.5, which is 5. So x is equal to 10.5. And again, we know that because I could go back in and plug in my answer. Let's go ahead and let's look at least one or two more real quick. Okay. So x over, and remember this little line means divide, so x over 5 is equal to 10. We know the inverse of divide is to multiply. So I'm going to multiply 5 on each side. Make sure you draw your line. So if I multiply by 5 on this side, that cancels out. So I'm going to multiply by 5 on this side. So x is equal to 50. I know this is true because I can go 50 divided by 5, and it does give me 10. Let's try one more before we go. And again, I will leave you some practice problems in Schoology for you to practice on your own. Let's do one more. Let's do one with the fraction this time. So I know that, let's say 2/5 times x is equal to, let's say 9. And again, I'm just making up something, so let's see how it goes. So again, we know when it's together like this with no sign, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiply is to divide. So I'm going to divide it by 2/5, divide by 2/5. This cancels out. So now I need to remember what I talked about with my fractions when I multiply or divide a fraction. So keep, change, and flip. Turn it into a fraction first by putting it over 1. So keep, change, flip, and I get 45 over 2. Of course, we can't leave it like that, so I'm going to see how many times 2 goes into 45. And I have 1 left over. So in this case, x is equal to 22.5. And again, we know this is correct because I can just simply go back in and plug it in. 2.2 over 5 times 22.5 and see if I get 9. Hope this helps.